This is Chatter Sketch. I'm Sarah Mensinga, here to tell you a story and draw you a picture. I'm going to start showing you today's artwork because that way I don't have to compress the time too much. But before we get rolling with the story, if you've been listening along, thank you so much. And I thought I should mention that although there's nothing too graphic in my book, there are some mature themes. So just keep that in mind if you have kiddos around. I'm a parent and I know I appreciate getting a heads up when it comes to content. Anyway, let's get started. Currently, Chapter 3. I brace my back against the wagon, pushing until my boots slip on the loose gravel roadway and I have to scramble for better footing. The tide gleams below as it seeps into our village. I see shallow pools on the plains, which I know will deepen through the day. By nightfall, all that water will churn up and over the kelp trees, swallowing every cliff and cave on the lower slopes. When the tide comes, we're usually already halfway up Versailles Mountain, like we are today. But I've heard stories of elders misinterpreting the stars, of people waking up to drenched sleeping mats, and of frantic families wading to the mountain road, forced to leave everything behind. Would you like some water? Grantia offers me a tin cup. I shake my head and continue to strain against our wagon, which is piled high with dried amphib meat, water pods, clothing, and all sorts of belongings. This tide we're sharing our wagon with the Therans and Rinians, which also means we're sharing the task of hauling it up the curving road. At the moment, it's my turn to push, along with Cara Rinian and her uncle Newis. Meanwhile, Gash Theron wears a leather harness and pulls up front. Unless you're very old, very young, very ill, or very pregnant, everyone in Saltpool helps haul the wagons to Versailles City. Are you thirsty, dear? Gren offers the mug to Cara, who nods. The Rinians and I tried to convince Gren to ride on our wagon this tide, but she refused. And now here she is, still trying to help. I understand that she doesn't want to be a burden, but I worry about her. Each tide, the climb from Saltpool to Versailles, seems to drain her more. One of these winters I should be polite and stay in Saltpool to welcome the sirens, she often jokes. And lately it seems less like a joke, and more like a plan she's trying to feel braver about. At least she's not pushing the wagon this time. Like every year, the final sun edges of fall were a blur of labor. My fingers are still puckered and green from pickling the harvest, and my arms are scratched from crating wild hens, setting Visconti traps, and gathering the last few water pods growing in the deepest parts of Coral Lake. I spent 3 days disassembling the roof, door, and shutters of our hut, and then I dragged all that kelpwood over to the Therans so they could use it to build the wagon I struggle against now. I also spent a day packing Grentia's stone-lined cellar with everything we aren't allowed to bring to Versailles, like butchering knives or amphib poisons. No matter how carefully I tuck and fold our belongings in oilskins, though, and no matter how meticulously I seal every seam with wax, I know the roaming ocean will breach at least one of those packets. After the tide passes, something is always ruined. Last year it was my snapper darts. The year before it was our best axe. For once, though, I welcomed the exhausting winter preparations, because they stopped me from thinking too much about my wedding. I look for Carnos, but instead I see sand further down the road. It's not his turn to push the wagon his family's sharing with Saltpool's healer. So he's walking with a dozen of Bessel's reed mats slung across his back, mats she'll sell at the barracks market. He looks at me for a moment. No, not at me, at my throat. He surely noticed I'm not wearing my black shell necklace anymore, the one he made for me. I haven't left a gift for the sirens in a long time, but I did this morning. I spread the necklace out on the windowsill of Gren's hut, and I know it will be gone after the tide passes. The three-god priests hate it when we leave gifts for the sirens. They say it's a form of water goddess worship, but a lot of the villagers do it anyway. I doubt many Deeplanders believe sirens exist, but there's something comforting about keeping up our traditions. It's also a small, satisfying way to disobey the Versailles priests. When I was small, my mother always hid trinkets in the dead boat, and then told me that the sirens left them during the tide. We'd hunt for those treasures each spring, barefoot and muddy, and it was one of the few times I ever heard Mam laugh. Leaving that necklace wasn't as difficult as marrying Carnos will be. but it still feels like an important step because it's something that can't be undone. At dusk, our village stops for the night. We huddle around cook fires for a while, and then make up beds inside the wagons for small children, and beneath the wagons for everyone else. The deeplands have been getting chilly, but the air is even colder on the mountain, and there's also a bitter, constant wind. After sharing a simple meal of shell beets and crab with Gren, I put on my wild wool jacket, woven muffler, and knit hat, and then I wrap us in all the blankets we own. "I'll miss you, you know," Gren whispers as we lie there shivering. "You won't have to," I say. "I'll visit you every sun edge. I already told Carnos I will." "You think so now," Gren says. "But when a young woman marries, everything changes. It should, though, and it's for the best." It's not the cold that bothers me after that. It's those two terrible words. Everything changes. We reach Versailles the next morning and line up at the gates, alongside the needle-covered trees of the teeterwood. Carnos stands near us, with his mother and younger brother and their wagon. His fur-trimmed cloak makes him look wider than he already is, and every so often he gives my mittened hand an encouraging squeeze that grinds my knuckles together and makes my insides clench. Around noon, the gray straps begin letting villagers into the city, but as always, it's a long process. They have to account for every deeplander, record harvests, search wagons for illegal items, and then assign us barracks units. I shiver as we wait. Not only is the wind relentless, but we are also standing in the shadow of the Laeros Light God Temple, which stretches high above the city walls. For as long as I can remember, the temple has been under construction, appearing to grow beneath the scaffolding and tarps each time we arrive at the gates. The fluttering canvas shell is gone this tide, though, and instead pointed archways and slim pillars stand stern and tall. It's a beautiful building, but it must look out of place among the factories and housing towers of the lower city. I can only imagine it was built in this part of Versailles because the rest of the city is already so crowded. My feet are stiff and numb when I finally hear a priest call for deeplanders who wish to marry. About 20 people step forward with their families. Most of the couples are young, but there's one older pair. I wonder if they lost their spouses to illness and are remarrying, for only uplanders are allowed to divorce. San's parents stand beside me, and I tense when the priest asks if I'm their daughter. Yet Gren was right to assume Bessel would cooperate. San's mother nods yes, says my full name, Nerene Keel Olin, and confirms that we're all from Saltpool. His father, Trenet, goes as far as patting my arm and whispering, "Congratulations." He and I have always gotten along, though. I fight the urge to look around for Sand, because I shouldn't care how he's reacting to Carnos and my registration. I know I'm making the right decision, whether he likes it or not. Once the priest records all the engaged couples' names, it's time for the wedding ceremonies. Carnos and I follow him through the gate, and the only comforting thought I have is that at least our wedding will be over quickly. We'll walk to the small Kigar storm god temple near the wharf. The priest will recite a few three-god prayers, and then we'll be assigned barracks units. But once we're through the huge city gates, the priest doesn't head for the docks. Instead, he strides toward the impressive, gleaming doors of the new Laeros temple, his robe swinging out behind him. Fathoms, are Carnos and I going to be married in there? I stare up at the huge towers and polished carvings. The thought of being married in such a massive building makes me feel like somehow my union with Carnos will be even more unbreakable and eternal. The other couples exchange excited smiles, and Carnos crushes my hand again. I'm so stunned, though, it hardly hurts. The familiar sounds of the lower city seem muffled, too. The rumble of the automotors, the drone of people in the street, the constant hiss and roar of the current waste desalination plant. I suddenly wish I had the familiar weight of Sand's black shell necklace around my neck. And I also feel a twinge of panic that the necklace really is lost forever. What was I thinking? The temple is even more impressive inside, with shiny brass decorations and countless electric lights that look like glass flames. Almost everything else seems to be made of creamy marble. The intricately carved pillars, the smooth floors, and even the many benches. "Women over here, please," a priestess calls. Her hair is hidden beneath a tight-fitting hood. She leads us brides into an oval room, and moments later a flurry of other priestesses enter and undress us as if we're small children. Then we take turns climbing into 4 copper bathing basins that stand on the far side of the room. "I'd have gotten married just for this bath," sighs one of the brides. "Yeah, my sister's going to be jealous," agrees Himia, who's from my village. "She got married last tide, and it was just the same old, nothing special wharf wedding." I'm probably the only bride who would rather have a same old, nothing special wharf wedding. "Ooh, I hope we'll get to stay here for our wedding night," cries a girl who, aside from her ample curves, seems too young to be getting married. "Don't be silly," Himia says. "It's a temple. Wedding nights aren't for temples. Wedding nights are for..." She hums in a playful way that makes all the brides laugh, except me. No one seems to notice my silence, though. Then it's my turn. I'm told to climb into the basin furthest from the waiting brides. After 3 days of hiking up the cold mountain road, the hot water feels wonderful. I wish I could simply stay in the wash basin, relaxing and soaking, and perhaps skip the wedding altogether. Unfortunately, a priestess begins washing my hair with soap that smells like uppy perfume, and her touch isn't exactly soothing. She seems determined to scrub every last grain of traveling grit from my hair. The same priestess soon hurries me out of the basin and hands me a towel. Once I'm dry, she has me dress in a yellow robe that looks a lot like hers, although hers is hooded. Then she pulls my hair into a tight, straight Versailles braid. After that, I'm approached by a different priestess who holds a book and mechanical uppy pen. "I need your name and village." "Nerene Keel," I say. "I'm from Saltpool." She flips pages. "Ah, here you are. Nerene Keel Olin, marrying Carnos Kaelnos from Riversbourne." She makes a notation. "And you know about the procedure, yes? Once you've given birth to 2 children, you must report to Versailles City, even if the tide is out?" I nod again, thinking about Bessel. I've heard the procedure is painful, and every now and then some poor woman gets an infection afterward and doesn't recover. I also hate that the uppies constantly remind us about it, as if we'll forget. They even hang posters in the barracks. The one I hate most shows a pretty woman holding 2 babies, looking pleased as gray straps drag an ugly woman with 3 babies from the city. When all of us Deeplander women are clean and dressed, one of the priestesses leads us into the main worship hall. It's an impressive, intimidating space. The ceiling is a busy combination of stone arches and orange and yellow panes of glass, and we're surrounded by rows of identical benches that could surely seat several hundred worshippers. Only a few uppies are here now, though, and they look at us impatiently, as if our weddings are performances that should entertain them, but aren't. Fire burns bright in 4 hearths, too, and somewhere I can't see, a musician plays a somber, sluggish melody on chimer bells. I wonder what Sand would think of all of this. He's always hated that the Uplanders flaunt their wealth when we Deeplanders have so little. I suppose it bothers me too, although I know things could be much worse. I don't remember my life with Mam that clearly anymore, but I still have some unhappy memories. The criminal bands hurting her, how cold we'd be when it snowed, how hungry we'd get, and worse, how thirsty. I remember one winter, Mam was unconscious for a whole day, and I thought she'd died. Then there was the winter when a velvet wolf stalked us, and we could never sleep at the same time. Still thinking about Mam, I watch our grooms gather on the far side of the worship hall. They stand beneath a glittering, embroidered banner that depicts the immortals of Three-God, Laeros, Shale, and Kagar. The banner above us women shows the defeated water goddess. I think she's supposed to be gravely injured, but to me, she looks as if she's staring furiously over at Three-Gods, ready to rally and fight again. Carnos catches my eye and nods. I make myself smile in return, pulling my lips across my teeth. It's not fair to compare my feelings for him to my feelings for Sand. Carnos and I hardly know each other. Our pairing only happened because Gren and Atanda's mother are childhood friends. As Carnos and I experience life together, I'm sure we'll develop some sort of loving bond, or at the very least, I'll probably never have to talk him out of a reckless plan. He seems to have an abundance of good sense. "All rise for the High Priest of Laeros," a deep voice calls, and as the handful of uppies in the hall stand, an elderly man appears on a raised dais. He must be at least 10 years older than Grantia, and he looks as if he's about to collapse beneath the weight of his ornate, many-layered robes. Just like everything else in the temple, his garments are cream, gleaming gold, and copper, and surely he's meant to look as if he's blazing with sunlight. Instead, I find myself thinking of the annoying orange jelly crabs that cling to our fishing nets, the ones that smear slime all over my fingers when I try to pick them off. "Blessed are these deeplanders," the priest says, his words reverberating through the hall, surprisingly loud and strong. "May the favor of Laeros, Kagar, and Shale be upon them." The slippers the priestesses gave us to wear are so thin, I feel like I'm standing barefoot. Pain shoots up through my tired ankles. Hopefully, the ceremony won't take long. But despite his frail appearance, the high priest has plenty of strength to talk about the new temple, how it's taller than all the other mountain cities' temples, how it symbolizes Versailles' devotion to Three God, and how on clear days one can see Beth, the neighboring mountain city, from its highest tower. I dig a finger into the collar of my robes, trying to loosen them. The high priest then drones on about marriage, and how having our weddings in the city represents the ongoing friendship between uplanders and deeplanders. My collar really is far too tight. And why do they make us stand so close to a hearth? Is no one else uncomfortable? I look around at the other brides, but they all seem fine. They're either listening politely to the high priest or trading smiles and winks with their betrothed. Fanning my face with both hands, I'm vaguely aware of the high priest telling the complicated story of how Laeros became a god and how he joined forces with Kagar and Shale to defeat the water goddess when she tried to flood the world. Fanning my face with both hands, I'm vaguely aware of the high priest telling the complicated story of how Laeros became a god and how he joined forces with Kagar and Shale to defeat the water goddess when she tried to flood the world. Sand probably thinks I'm already married. He and his parents have surely been assigned a barracks unit by now and are unpacking. I imagine Trenet and Sand dragging parcels up from the wagon, while Bessel arranges cookware in the tiny alcove behind the door. Usually, Grantia and I would be doing the same thing. And although the Rinians promised to help her until Carnos and I reach the barracks, I hope they aren't too busy with their own belongings. This tide, though, I won't share Gren's barracks unit. I'll share one with Carnos. And in a short while, I'll be expected to do something there I don't really want to do. I can't imagine it will be anything like it was with Sand, lying in the soft seagrass beneath a dead boat. Instead, I find myself thinking of the wild dogs that sometimes mate with our village mutts on the dust plains. It's a horrible, stomach-turning thought, and once I think it, I can't push it out of my mind. Even Gren was trying to give me advice last night. It might not be pleasant at first. Just allow him to be persistent. Persistent. My robes feel heavier and hotter than they were a moment ago. I look at Carnos. He's watching the high priest enraptured. His robes are too short, and the hem hangs a hand's width above the floor. The priests probably weren't able to find slippers to fit him either, for he's barefoot. I clutch my middle, close my eyes, and lower my head. All of this will be over soon, even the part in our small barracks room on the thin cot. Nerene Keel Olin and Carnos Kaelnos, a priest calls. I look up, and it's as if I've been in a dark hut for hours, rather than simply shutting my eyes for a moment. Gray spots blur the hall, and I'm still blinking my vision clear when a nearby priestess directs me to the dais. At least Carnos and I will be married first, and I don't have to wait any longer. I breathe deeply in and out, and I feel like I'm leaving Sand's necklace on the windowsill of Gren's hut all over again. I'm sure that once I marry Carnos, I'll have second thoughts. But that's exactly why I have to do this. It can't be undone, and then I'll be safely married, and Sand and I will be out of each other's reach forever. There's no swelling tide below me, and no heavy wagon to push. But somehow, climbing these dozen marble steps seems far harder than hiking up the mountain road. Carnos walks slowly beside me, matching my pace. When we reach the High Priest, he takes us both by the hand. Up close, he looks even older, with loose skin like fur oyster flesh and mucus in his eyes. "In the warmth and clarity of Laeros, light god," he booms, his breath smelling of spring wine and the white stuff that grows on underroots when they're stored for too long. I look over at Carnos, at his nose that looks like it has been broken at least once, at the freckles that seem so strangely arranged on just his chin, and at his large mouth that seems to have no teeth until he smiles very wide. Soon that face will press against mine, kissing me, and more. "In admiration of the perseverance of Kagar Storm God," the High Priest continues. I wonder if Sand will leave Versailles on his own, stow away on a ship, and explore the sea spread. If he does, he will probably never return. I'll never see him again. "And in the protection of shale stone gods, eternal strength." If only another Saltpool family took pity on me 10 tides ago. If only Gren could have adopted me. My vision blackens as if I've shut my eyes again. I imagine running down the mountain road, diving into the tide, and swimming through the cold shadows until I find my necklace. "Do you pledge to be loyal to each other, second only to your devotion to Three God?" "I do," Carnos rumbles, his eyes on mine. And then it's my turn to speak. Yet when I open my mouth, no words come out. Instead, my breakfast of pigeon eggs and greenberries surges up, splashing across the High Priest's robes and spattering the brand new marble dais. So that's it for this episode. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram under both Sarah Mensinga and Chattersketch, because apparently I have a bad habit of creating too many social media accounts. So see you next time on Chattersketch, where you can come for the art and stay for the story, or come for the story and stay for the art.